I haven't seen this one. It's not happened, this one. Excuse me, my friend.
We've spoken to quite a lot of Pakistani Muslims who say that there were many tensions between the two communities when you first arrived.
That's not a problem, my friend. We're talking about two teenagers have a little bit, maybe fighting. It's okay. That's not any problem we make issue.
The Pakistani community complain that your young men harass their women.
That's not true.
No, it doesn't happen.
That's not true. We haven't from Pakistani people asking this question about us. Nobody have told us like this.
Did you not think there is a say? This is wonderful. It's like speaking to a Soviet official in 1972. Well, is there not a difference of approach between your young men and the Pakistani Muslim young men?
We haven't any problem, my friend.
Well, my friend, if I was representing Kurdish asylum seekers who want the government to let them stay here, I'd also play down the problems. Apparently, the two communities are getting on a little better these days, but there is a serious issue here. The deputy leader of Derby City Council was outraged at the way in which the Kurds had been brought into his community.
Now, you were suddenly faced with the need to accommodate a whole bunch of asylum seekers. Why?
The government told us that they were going to send in a number of asylum seekers, set at just over 1,000, and we ended up with nearly double that, with no consultation. We couldn't cope with the numbers that we were getting. We hadn't got enough housing, the infrastructure couldn't cope, and neither could our support services.
And that, remember, was a result of just 2,000 asylum seekers. So how should we deal with the exponentially larger numbers of immigrants coming into Britain? Last year, immigrants swelled our population by over 150,000. There's a practical issue to be faced. Where do we put them all once they're here? The government says that over the next 20 years we're going to need 1,180,000 extra homes to house all the immigrants coming to Britain. South East England is already one of the most densely populated areas in Europe, something that any commuter to the capital intuitively understands.
You get on a train pretty much anywhere in the southeast of England before about 6:45 in the morning, and you should have a comfortable ride. The train won't be crowded, it'll probably be on time, and people will treat you with respect and deference and courtesy. Hell, you may even strike up a conversation.
This train terminates at Willesden Green.
Get on that same train an hour later, and the last thing you want is a conversation. Your train will be slower, you will sit or stand in acute discomfort, and you will be irritable and fractious.
It all reminds me a little of the scary sci-fi film Soylent Green, where everybody had about 1 square foot of room to themselves, and we ended up eating each other.
If you wanted to, you could cover the whole of the southeast in housing. After all, if you go on holiday to Mexico or to Japan or to a number of other countries in Asia and South America, you will fly over cities which have got populations of 25 million people, almost 4 times that of London. The question is, what would the cost be in terms of quality of life, which would radically change and, in my view, wholly for the worse, life in England, and particularly in the southern half of England, where, of course, most immigrants tend to go.
There's any number of costly practical problems. The pressure upon our beleaguered transport system, our congested roads and our frayed rail networks.
Allowing our nation to become more and more crowded has other implications. Just look at what happens as population density goes up in parts of London. Crime rates are 50% higher in the most crowded London boroughs compared to the least crowded. The more people, the greater the problems. Developed countries with low population densities, such as Sweden and Australia, have high life expectancies and living standards. And of course there are other side effects of immigration policy, particularly since the enlargement of the European Union. It is now much easier for criminals in member states to smuggle people into the country. This woman is one of them. She was smuggled here from Eastern Europe and then forced by her gangmaster, or pimp, into the sex trade in Soho.
He told me that he had to take me to a striptease club, and he was trying to make me dance, and I couldn't. And he was angry. And then I was really panicked. And after 2 days, he said that I have to go to work in the sauna. You try not to think that it's real, you know?
So he wanted you to become a prostitute?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even know what is a sauna in the beginning, and it was really bad. You just feel, I don't know, betrayed, and a lot of pain. It was horrible every time. I couldn't get used to it.
This woman has now escaped from her tormentors, but it is proving difficult to send her back home. Yes, she's become an asylum seeker. She's being helped by a victim support group in London. I assume another support group is helping the pimp.
We did a survey in London this summer of the off-street sex industry, and we found that there are about 8,000 women involved in prostitution in London, and a lot of these women may have been trafficked, so it is a big problem. Certainly, the enlargement of the EU has made it a lot easier for traffickers to bring women here. Most of the referrals that we get are from Eastern Europe, but we also see women from Africa, certainly from Southeast Asia, and definitely from Latin America as well, so it's a global issue.
Women from abroad working in the sex trade are contributing to another of the problems of immigration: disease.
Of course, this is a sensitive issue, and as soon as Michael Howard raised it in his election campaign, it was implied that he was playing the race card. But I don't understand why it's racist to worry about the fact that we'll be importing, along with those 5.1 million immigrants, TB and AIDS.
The HIV statistics are frightening. Government figures show that black Africans make up less than 1% of our population, but they account for 36% of all diagnosed HIV infection.
I talked to a number of doctors working in VD clinics, and they were very concerned about this. And they have told me that 95% of their patients are now from sub-Saharan Africa and are heterosexual. And that is completely from immigration. They said that now, because of immigration, we would have what we've so far successfully managed to avoid having, which is an HIV epidemic amongst heterosexuals in this country.
So let's be clear that before mass immigration, it was an illness mainly which afflicted homosexuals.
Homosexuals and intravenous drug users, and it was very much around these people. But now that has changed completely with immigration.
It's a question which it is thought churlish or impolite to ask. Are you happy to pay more in taxes than to wait much longer for your hospital treatment because ahead of you in the queue are immigrants who have so far contributed nothing? Yes, I grant you, it's a nasty question.
But there's another, rather more pressing problem upon which our politicians invariably seem to speak with forked tongue. A problem which threatens a whole bunch of basic rights, which British people seem to believe in, and which, in many cases, they fought long and hard for.
Because we're also importing an interpretation of Islam which is at odds with our indigenous culture.
What this government is doing now is welcoming radical clerics here. If they continue to allow people like that in this country, soon there will be trouble.
The Islam we are importing has about it a conviction and certitude which you might think admirable. But it's this refusal to entertain doubt which makes it wholly alien to that thing we might call Britishness. Sure, it's hard to know precisely what is meant by Britishness. At a very specific level, our culture changes not just from year to year, but from shire to city, from north to south. But there are certain basic values around which we do coalesce. Sexual equality, tolerance of differing beliefs, freedom of speech and the rule of law, to name but a few. But the kind of people we're letting in raises fundamental questions about what kind of country we are.